There are so few people remaining of my age and my generation, so I like to come out here and just look at the trees are as old or older than I am and say something has lived beyond and is still standing. It's an inspiration, and it should be to anybody, and I salute it.
Roy helped create this renaissance of the Alutiiq culture.
Roy's always been about lifting up people and acknowledging what other people bring to the table.
I would never have described him as forceful, but he was.
He speaks in such a way that you want to listen to every word.
He was a counselor at the same time he was a judge. Few people have told me the best thing that ever happened in my life was the day that I talked with your grandfather and he sentenced me to jail.
6 days a week he had a suit and a tie on to go to work, but any chance he got, we were outside hiking and climbing and getting on top of the mountains.
He's spiritual, he's embracing.
He leads in a way that's not power hungry or domineering, but rather leading through his example, through a quiet and strong presence.
Well, he's accepted across the lines, but he doesn't fit perfectly in any box. He was an activist without the paraphernalia.
As the patriarch of the family, this is the only place that they come together to meet each other, really. Well, I hope that somebody continues on after I'm gone. Well, my mother was a descendant of the original Russian settlers here and the Sugpiaq-Alutiiq people. My mother died when I was 4 years old, and there were about 5 children at that time, and my dad had eventually, he married Alexandra Chernoff, and she had a large extended family here in Kodiak. We were related to at least 2/3 of the people that lived here when it had a population of 400.
Roy Madsen's a fascinating figure in Kodiak history and Native history in general. He is the island, as many of us are. And when you scrape off all the trappings and all the conversation and all the culture and all the art and everything, it really comes down to place. And Roy never lost sight of the place.
This book was written by a fellow named Harry Dodge, and it's the Kodiak Island and its bears. Judge Madsen's family is prominently displayed. And the family business was bear hunting, Kodiak bear hunting on the island of Kodiak. They would have princes, royalty, various bigwigs in the United States, everybody coming to Kodiak. That was the culture in which Roy was brought up in.
My dad started taking me out to the bear camps when I was 10 years old. My job was to take a knife and cut all the flesh off of the skull, take the brains out, the eyes, the tongue, the gums, everything. I would sit there and scrape and scrape and scrape all day long, trying to get this down to bare bone. I was the head man of the camp. I never thought about the future when I was a child and what was going to happen. I just assumed that I would follow in my father's footsteps. This is a press release from the 7th Fleet, the Southwest Pacific area in the Philippines, that published in the Kodiak Mirror on March 3rd, 1945, talking about myself, the local boy, seeing action against the Japanese. The picture is of myself at my 20-millimeter gun.
And I know you were also the navigator.
Yes, I was also the navigator.
He got in too young and colorblind, but he made a great navigator.
When I got out of the Navy, I decided I'd rather fish up in Bristol Bay. I had a wife and 2 children to support. It was an unbelievable experience. In those days, they didn't allow power boats. It was 32-foot sailboats with a 2-man crew. And the weather being what it was, I had to wear rubber boots, wool underwear, wool pants, and I wear a sheepskin coat and oilskins on top of that, and no life jackets. And so if you fell over, you just went down. First year that I was there were about 14 men, fishermen, that drowned. I just decided that there had to be an easier way to make a living than being a fisherman.
The book has wonderful pictures, and I always remember him smiling. And here's one with his dad, and he's not smiling. His face is just glum. This is in 1947, so Roy must have been thinking, I need to get out of here and go to law school.
Roy didn't necessarily follow the family tradition, and he was one of those breakout personalities. And when he became a lawyer, it was a huge quantum leap conceptually. And so that really separated him and to some degree isolated him.
Started taking a correspondence course in law. Eventually, I made the decision to move to Portland, Oregon, and enrolled in the Northwestern College of Law. Took the bar exam and was admitted to practice in the state of Oregon. Then got the job as an assistant district attorney. After I'd been practiced for about 8.5 years, I said, I think I'm probably ready to move on into private practice. I studied for the Alaska bar and was admitted in March of '62. And at that time, there was only one lawyer in Kodiak. As soon as I was admitted, he closed up his office and moved to Anchorage, so I was the only lawyer here.
The worst earthquake in North American history struck the state of Alaska. Overturned railway cars and all the other after effects of a major disaster.
Roy was able to come back right before the great earthquake. His timing was fortuitous in many respects because he could help Kodiak build up again after the tidal wave.
I think it was either January or February of 1965, where my Uncle Roy Madsen, Carl Armstrong, Harry Carter, and several other people gathered together in a little tiny office to establish a health organization of the Kodiak Island Native people to help them be in charge of their own well-being and their quality of life.
So we eventually formed what was called, and now is, the Kodiak Area Native Association.
I mean, it grew from a very small, focus on health, and then to a larger expanse of social services. And then when the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act was formed, my Uncle Roy was very instrumental in making that happen.
The state legislature had enacted a law that permitted people to go onto state-selected land and build any kind of a structure there and improve it, and then they could get title to a 5-acre tract. And it was without regard to Native people.
This concept of land ownership from an opportunity value is not the indigenous view of land ownership.
There were other Native organizations being organized throughout the state, and eventually this became the Alaska Federation of Natives.
The Kodiak Area Native Association became the political lobbying for Kodiak at the AFN level. And that was sort of the thing that moved it from sort of a club and just a kind of a thing, an association, into a player.
When ANCSA passed, we had to incorporate all the villages, incorporate not only that, but tribal entities as well. A majority of the people that had no more than an 8th grade education, that were either fishermen or trappers, living a subsistence lifestyle, being dragged into the corporate world and say, well, you've got to be a director of a corporation, or you have to have a president, you have to have elections, you have to have boards of directors that make decisions. It was an entirely new concept.
And the land claims settlement is an extremely complex piece of legislation from the standpoint that it's a deviation from traditional American settlements with indigenous peoples. Alaska is the only place where there was no Indian removal. We live in our original village sites. That's absolutely unique in the American experience. And Roy was right there.
I grew up close to the wildness. I enjoyed the beauty of the mountains, going down to the beach. Or going out into the forest. Climbing the mountain and seeing what's on the other side. It was always enjoyable to climb to the top of Pillar, trying to visualize the people that had come before.
When you think about Roy Madsen, you have to think about what his job was. And he's a judge in a small town. So every time he hears a case, there's a winner and a loser. Roy does this all his professional life and holds the admiration of the entire island.
He was the everyman for Kodiak. He wasn't some Anchorage person that came down that became appointed as the judge. He was the people's judge. He was Kodiak.
I think it's a benefit actually to serve in a smaller community where you're immersed in the daily activities of the people and know what's going on around you, as opposed to somebody in a large city that's kind of isolated. I had many occupations, many experiences throughout my life. And when I first started practicing, a lot of the young lawyers, they had no practical experience. I was 30 years old when I was admitted to practice law. And so I'd had my experience in in World War II, and the years as a guide and a fisherman and a longshoreman and all the things that I did.
When he first started as a judge, he was a traveling judge. He went to all the remote villages up north and had some real interesting cases. He carried real heavy down parka, and you're always flying in small planes.
Well, I traveled from here to Cold Bay, Sandpoint, Alaska, St. Paul, Naknek, and Dillingham. At one time, I calculated it was something like 1,600 miles. And that was my circuit of 67,000 square miles of area. The first time I went to Cold Bay, the magistrate met me there, and he said, you know, we haven't a judge come out here for 7 years.
When I applied to become a judge, and I went in front of the Judicial Council, and they asked me, give us the name of a judge who inspired you the most, the kind of judge that you would like to follow. And I said, Judge Roy Madsen.
A person is seeking justice. They have to have somebody that is willing to listen and to absorb what they are going through and then make a decision based on the facts and that information. And if you do those things and have an open mind and open heart, justice is going to prevail.
Even if you didn't win that particular hearing, you walked away knowing that he considered everything that you had to say and that you had your day in court. When we had the dedication ceremony, he took off his robe, he handed it to me, and I still have that robe in my office, and I'll put it on for inspiration.
The cathedral is the oldest Orthodox church in North America. It was established in 1794. One of the great joys is seeing Roy attend divine services. And it has an impact. We have a saying in our faith that we're saved in community. His presence always brings joy to people, comfort. It's almost that sense, that grandfatherly sense of the world's in order.
God has given Judge Roy many, many years, and we pray that he will continue to give him many, many years as he continues to bestow for the rest of us a wisdom and a grace and an experience.
We are standing in All Saints of Alaska Chapel on the grounds at St. Herman's Seminary. And my father-in-law, mitred Archpriest Father Joseph Creta, was the founder of the seminary, and he and Roy worked together during the incorporation of the seminary.
He's not only a legal mind, but a spiritual man, and a man who seeks meaning in life. And ultimately, I think he found that one of the most important places was here in the Orthodox Church. And he spent a tremendous amount of time throughout the years I've been here in church, singing, mentoring our students, and being a kind of fatherly figure to our students.
I was born with FAS, which is fetal alcohol syndrome, and I didn't have a lot of hope and ended up faced with either going to jail or going to, a young man's Orthodox academy, and I gladly chose the academy. That's where I transformed my life, and it was because of my grandfather that happened. And even to this very day, he still puts everything he has into helping now both my wife and I.
Let's start with an award from the Orthodox Church. The one that's hanging on the wall was given to me by the Metropolitan of All-American Canada for service to the seminary. The one on the left is a cross of St. Herman, which was awarded to me for service to the seminary. I never anticipated that such rich rewards for the things that I did, just part of my life.
Judge Roy has been instrumental in conserving coastal brown bears and the Kodiak National Wildlife Refuge. The bear was originally commissioned by the Madsen family to commemorate the leading conservationists of Kodiak brown bears on Kodiak Island. And they encouraged the United States Congress to designate Kodiak National Wildlife Refuge as a protected area for Kodiak brown bears.
The history of our region is that people were exploited for a couple hundred years before others were even colonized. So that left a lasting impression on a lot of elders in the community. Roy took part in numerous meetings and gatherings with elders throughout the region to integrate both Western science and traditional knowledge that we teach children in school. When people heard that Roy was going to take part in it, I think it gave people confidence to know that it was okay to come to the table and share what they knew. One of the goals was to focus on science, not just Western science, and help kids realize that they come from very intelligent people. The contributions have been significant in that we can erase those very harsh words that were told to our native ancestors. And we see it in today's generation of children who never heard the term dumb Aleut because of, sorry. Kids in my generation, grew up hearing that a lot. And it's emotionally scarring. And I'm proud to say that my kids never heard that term. And it's because of people like Roy, who always knew how intelligent his mother and grandparents were and all the rest. And he made use of that information. He was always willing to share it.
God grant you many years, God grant you many years, God grant you many years, God grant you many years.
He is what I consider a true elder. We all get old, but it's not always that we become an elder.
The story of our elders gives us so much hope. And seeing their bravery, really and truly they started from a place of nothing, and seeing just in that short time period of one lifetime how much we've been able to accomplish just from the fact that a few people like Uncle Roy stood up and took ownership and were fearless in their leadership. So it's taught us to be brave ourselves.
I think it makes everyone proud to know that a member of their tribe, their hometown, has played a really important role in the history of the state of Alaska, the Native Land Claims Act, and the legal system, because he's the first and only Alaska Native judge.
Kodiak Island is often referred to as the Rock. I've gone to it for 92 years.
So at this point in our lives, we talk about what will be on headstones for this person or that person.
Yes.
And one, of course, was he who clings to the rock. But I think a simple one would also just be Roy Madsen. He loved and served. Roy enriched my life, teaching me to be patient and adaptable. Besides, I think I acquired more of a sense of humor by necessity.
Moose liver, oh, the fragrance when you're frying. It almost makes me feel like crying. It smells so good. And those onions, those beautiful onions, turning golden in the pan. I can't wait. I'm already beginning to salivate. Moose liver tonight.